Life once seemed straightforward and predictable. My twin brother, Ethan, and I were always rivals. Even though we were twins, our parents, with their playful nature, named us Oliver and Ethan, reminiscent of legendary knights. Yet our bond was anything but harmonious. Ethan, with his natural charisma and athletic prowess, always appeared to thrive, while I, being the older twin by just 2 minutes, found it hard to receive the same recognition. It's amusing how childhood interactions can influence your entire existence. Thinking about my marriage to Sophia, I saw it reflected that same rivalry, perpetually striving for something just beyond grasp. When we first met, she seemed flawless, intelligent, beautiful, and ambitious. Together, we built a life filled with children, a suburban home, and stable careers. But gradually, something vital was missing, transforming our marriage into a monotonous routine rather than a relationship built on love. As I hurried out of the house, my body couldn't keep up. I violently vomited, expelling more than just fast food. It was the accumulated pain and resentment I had been holding in for far too long. The harsh truth of my fractured marriage struck me deeply. Sophia followed me outside, barefoot and pleading. I pushed her away, shouting for her to leave me alone as I sped away, the car engine drowning out her voice. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing there in her bathrobe, arms crossed, looking worried yet not enough to make me stop. Realizing there was no love left between us hurt more than catching her cheating just minutes earlier. It wasn't a new discovery, just an old reality I had been avoiding. When I arrived at Ethan's apartment, he greeted me with concern, but I brushed past him and collapsed onto the couch. His cluttered apartment always irritated me with its dirty dishes and scattered clothes. He had been engrossed in video games when I got there. Classic Ethan. "Everything okay, bro?" he asked, nudging me. I ignored him and he eventually went back to his game. Finally, I lost it. "Aren't you supposed to be at work?" Without even looking away from the screen, he replied. "Aren't you watching him play?" My frustration intensified. How could he sit there casually playing video games while my life was unraveling? Why did everything come so easily to him while I bore all the burdens? I exploded, catching even myself by surprise. "Can you turn that crap off? What are you, 16? Ethan shrugged, unfazed, and continued playing. "What's your problem?" he asked calmly. That's how Ethan dealt with everything. Nothing ever bothered him. My anger surged. I grabbed his controller and smashed it against the wall. "What the hell, Art?" I yelled. "What's wrong with you?" I shouted, jabbing him in the chest. What's wrong with me? If you have a problem, leave. This is my place. Go back home to your wife," I snapped. "We'd fought before, but this time it's different," he replied. Fueled by rage, I attacked again, but Ethan, always stronger, easily overpowered me and knocked me unconscious. When I regained consciousness, I heard Ethan on the phone. "I don't know what's wrong with him," he said. Seeing me awake, he smirked and tossed me an ice pack. "You done acting like an idiot? Why did you called Sophia?" I groaned. "Sheck, your wife should handle you," he replied. "Call her back. Tell her I left her. Died. I don't care. I can't talk to her right now." His expression softened. "What's going on, Art? You come over here and swing at me. What's your deal?" Reluctantly, I recounted the day's events. The sick feeling after eating poorly, deciding to work from home, and the unexpected discovery that shattered my world. I hadn't anticipated Sophia being home, and the unfamiliar car outside didn't raise any alarms. I was too focused on reaching the bathroom, unaware that my life was about to change forever. As I finished my story, Ethan became serious. "That witch," he yelled. "Screw her." I chuckled dryly. Darkly funny. That's exactly what that guy was doing. Ignoring my comment, Ethan started pacing. "Who is this guy? Do we know him?" He paused, looking worried. "Tell me, it's not Brian?" "No, not Brian," I replied. But the guy looked familiar. A knock on the door interrupted us. It was Sophia. "He left?" Ethan said coldly, cutting off her protests. When he returned, I gave him a grateful smile, and we spent the rest of the afternoon in silence. Eventually, I knew I had to confront Sophia. Avoiding her was just postponing the inevitable. When I got home, everything appeared normal, almost as if it had been a bad dream, but it wasn't. Inside, Sophia tried to talk. "We should talk," she said. I sighed, remaining silent. She apologized, but it felt empty, more about how I found out than the betrayal itself. I sarcastically threw her words back, mocking her hollow apology. We argued about everything except the core issue, avoiding the real pain. Finally, I asked, "How long has it been since we made love?" She hesitated. "What does that have to do with anything? It's like you were just doing me a favor," I said. "But that guy, he gets enthusiastic." She didn't respond, and I realized I was just trying to provoke her, wanting her to feel something, anything close to what I felt. But she couldn't because I hadn't cheated. I had kept my vows. After a tense silence, I finally asked, "Do you still love me, Sophia?" Her hesitation spoke volumes. "Yes, but not in the same way. Not anymore, not in that way," I repeated, understanding she no longer loved me. Exhausted, I stood up to leave. She reached for my hand. "Don't walk away. We need to finish this." I yanked my hand back. "What more is there to say? You don't love me?" "That's not what I meant," she said quickly. "I know you're hurting, and I regret that, but you're twisting my words because you know me so well." I scoffed. "When did you stop loving me? Was it before or after you started cheating?" She narrowed her eyes. "I don't recall you ever bringing that up. Acting like an idiot won't make this easier." I shot back, "My bad. I didn't realize it was so hard for you." She opened her mouth to reply but stopped. Her patience finally worn thin. She said, "You know what, Oliver? You're right. I should stop apologizing. You're just going to twist everything I say anyway." I couldn't help myself. "One last shot. Was that you trying to protect my feelings?" "That did it." Her expression hardened, and she smirked. "Yes, I was trying to protect your feelings. I wasn't going to tell you that you're a boring, overweight man who's terrible in bed, or that the last time we had fun was before I got pregnant. But since you insist." Her words struck deep. "I wanted the truth, but not like this," I said, then snapped. "Well, when your wife just lies there like a blow-up doll, what do you expect?" Unfazed, she delivered the final blow. "If you'd seen me with Sebastian, you'd know what it's like with a man who knows what he's doing." It hit me hard. My pride shattered. I was speechless, her words ringing in my ears. Seeing my reaction, her anger shifted to regret.
"Oliver, I'm sorry."
"I didn't mean it," she began, but I turned and left before she could finish. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room, disoriented and late for work. Her words, "boring overweight man," echoed in my head as I stared at myself in the mirror. Before yesterday, I thought my life was good. Comfortable job, nice house, kids in private school. But apparently that wasn't enough for her. She wanted someone else. Someone who wasn't me. As I left the bathroom, Sophia and I awkwardly crossed paths in the hallway. "I need to wake Lucas," she said. "Okay," I mumbled. We hurried in opposite directions, and I was relieved to leave the house. At work, I tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting back to Sophia and her affair. Her words haunted me. "If you really saw me with Sebastian, you'd know what I'm like with a man who knows what he's doing." My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Last night got out of hand. We need to talk without the petty nonsense." Anger flared, but I didn't lash out. I simply texted back, "Agreed. We'll talk tonight." She replied almost instantly, "Okay. See you then." At work, I couldn't shake her cruel words. While meeting with a store manager, I spotted a fit young guy named Marcus watching him work. I couldn't help but compare myself, her words echoing in my mind. When I asked Marcus how he stayed in shape, he handed me a gym card and suggested I check it out. I stuffed it in my wallet, unsure if I'd ever actually use it. At home, Sophia and I sat in silence until I finally broke the quiet. "Why, Sophia?" A tear slipped down her cheek. "Because I'm not attracted to you anymore. We've lost the spark," she said quietly. Clenching my teeth, I asked, and I'm bad in bed, right? She shook her head sadly. I'm sorry for what I said yesterday. I was angry. Is it true? I asked, but her silence was the answer. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you talk to me about this before? Why let it go on for years? I asked, frustration mounting. I tried to talk about it, but nothing changed. So I convinced myself I had no right to be unhappy. I couldn't believe it. You never told me I was bad in bed, but I did mention your weight, she said defensively. How was I supposed to know that meant you were unhappy in our marriage? I shot back. I thought it was just a phase. Why didn't you try to fix us? She retorted. I wasn't the one cheating. I snapped. If you were so unhappy, you should have said something. Not gone behind my back. After a long silence, she finally said softly, I think we should get a divorce, Oliver. Her words hung in the air. Logically, it made sense, but love isn't logical. I felt a surge of anger, not just because of the affair, but because I wasn't the one initiating the split. I should have been the one to end it, but I was still holding on to hope. Of course you think we should, I said bitterly. Never mind the kids, right? Just divorce because you need sex. Come on, Oliver, you said you were unhappy too, she replied. I started to argue but stopped myself. It was pointless. She was done, and I needed to leave. This time she didn't try to stop me. As I was about to walk out, one last question burned in my mind. Without turning around, I asked, Who was that guy? Sebastian, she replied. His name is Sebastian. He works with me. Sebastian, I muttered, remembering him from an office P. Oliver 2 years ago. You two danced a lot. She quickly responded, sensing where I was going. We weren't sleeping together. Well, I guess that's something, I scoffed bitterly. But you were flirting, right? What does it matter, Oliver? She asked with a sad look. It matters to me, I said. She rolled her eyes. Fine. There was some attraction, maybe flirting, but it was just office banter. Things didn't get serious until we started meeting at the gym. Of course, the gym, I muttered, my voice dripping with venom. That's when you decided to ruin our marriage, right? Because I'm just the boring, fat guy, Oliver. She sighed. But I ignored you. He's great in bed, right? Turns you into a nympho. Those were your words. She repeated. I'm sorry. I said those things, sick of her hollow apologies. I muttered, whatever, and walked out. I drove straight to my brother's place. He took one look at me, stepped aside, and stayed quiet. He asked, Are you okay? I nodded. He returned with a blanket. Thanks, I said. No problem. Just don't act like an idiot, or I'll knock you out again, he joked. I headed to bed, spreading the blanket on the couch. I undressed, washed up, and caught my reflection in the mirror. Shaking my head, I walked out. Lying there on the couch, I couldn't help but wonder how my life had ended up like this. I'd done everything right. Worked hard, stayed loyal. But here I was, crashing on my brother's couch, like I was the one who messed up. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept replaying images of Sophia and Sebastian, laughing, flirting, at the gym, at work. Those hurt more than what I'd seen in the shower. Did they talk about me? Compare us? The thought stung. I finally managed to doze off, only to be woken when Ethan started getting ready for work. He grabbed a yogurt and ate it standing up in the kitchen, looking like a college kid. I kept my thoughts to myself. After all, I was staying at his place with no plans to leave anytime soon. Are you going to work today? He asked. I don't know, I muttered. Maybe. He shook his head as he finished his yogurt, tossing the spoon into the sink with a finality that matched his words. Art, don't let that which turn you into some sad, bitter mess. Move on. There are plenty of women out there who won't treat you like this. I didn't respond. His advice, while coming from a good place, felt out of touch with the reality I was living. For him, it was just another breakup, something temporary. But for me, it was the end of a 12-year marriage. Ethan never had to struggle with these kinds of emotional battles. He was the charming, good-looking guy who breezed through life, while I was the one who worked relentlessly for every little thing I had. I stayed at Ethan's for a week, but it wasn't long before we both realized we needed some space. Sophia sent me text after text, asking where I was and when I'd be coming back. I ignored them until one message mentioned that the twins were asking about me. That was the breaking point. I knew I had to go back home. I'd hoped the house would be empty when I returned, but when I pulled into the driveway, I saw Sophia's car already parked there. Inside, she was in the bedroom, sorting through my clothes. "So, you're finally back," she said, her voice almost too casual. "What's going on with my clothes?" I asked, confused. "I wasn't sure if you were coming back, so I figured I'd pack them up to make things easier for you," she said without looking up. "You knew exactly where I was, Sophia. You left me to handle the kids alone." I shot back, anger rising. "Do you even remember why I left in the first place?" I asked after a pause, incredulous at the situation. She sighed and muttered, "Fine. It's my fault. I messed up and I understand why you're angry. Did you ever love me?" she asked, as if the question still mattered. "Yes," I replied, but I could hear the hesitation in my own voice. "But it's not the same anymore, is it?" Her answer was a vague one. "I still love you in a way, but things are different now." I didn't know what to say to that. Nothing could be fixed at this point. "I'll move my stuff to the guest room," I said flatly. She nodded, her face showing a hint of sadness. To try to lighten the mood, I joked, "I'm getting a new bed for that room, by the way." She chuckled. "Yeah, you bought that uncomfortable bed to keep Ethan from staying over too long. Guess that plan backfired." I laughed, but it didn't feel right. We moved my clothes in silence, both of us avoiding eye contact, as though we had already accepted what was happening but weren't ready to admit it. The rest of the day was filled with nothing but awkward politeness. That evening, we had to sit down with the twins and break the news to them. Watching their confused, hurt faces was almost too much to bear. I couldn't even bring myself to look at Sophia, knowing she was the one responsible for all of this. The weeks that followed were a blur. I got in touch with a lawyer who told me that we would need to be separated for a year before we could even begin the divorce process. So, we agreed to separate, but every discussion about the terms felt like a battleground. Sophia wanted to start dating, and I was insistent that she keep it away from the kids. After 2 weeks, I moved into a new apartment, hoping that the change of scenery would give me some peace. But once I was settled in, it only felt emptier. One day, while sitting alone in my new place, I saw a commercial for the gym Marcus had recommended. Out of sheer boredom, I decided to check it out. As soon as I walked in, I felt completely out of place. But Chloe, the manager, greeted me with a warm smile, and after a brief conversation, she convinced me to take a tour. I was hesitant, but something about her kindness made me stay. Chloe showed me the gym's amenities, but what really grabbed my attention was a wall of before and after transformation photos. She pointed to one photo and said, "That was me when I first joined." I froze when I saw her before picture. She looked nothing like the Chloe in front of me now. She was at least 200 pounds heavier in the picture. Chloe explained, "I gained a lot of weight during my pregnancy. My husband bought me a treadmill for Christmas. I hated it at first, but it pushed me to make a change. With my brother-in-law's help, I lost over 75 pounds. "Wow," I said, genuinely impressed. "That's incredible." She smiled. "Oliver, don't feel out of place. We all start somewhere. Maybe one day your picture will be up here too." Her words had an unexpected effect on me. Maybe I could make a change. I signed up for a membership and started with their beginner program. A trainer showed me the ropes, teaching me how to use the equipment and offering tips on how to get the best results. I also booked weekly one-on-one sessions with a trainer named Manny, and I found myself enjoying the Thursday biking class, even if yoga wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. It felt good to be surrounded by others on their own journeys. It was one of the few things keeping me from losing myself completely. Meanwhile, things with Sophia continued to spiral out of control. One evening, I stopped by the kids' old house, and when I got there, I found Sophia's niece babysitting. When I asked where Sophia was, The niece looked nervous, practically admitting that Sophia was probably out with Sebastian. I stayed and spent time with the kids, then sent the niece home. Sophia didn't come back until 11, and when she walked through the door, I could see she was surprised to see me. She was stunning in a black dress, but her disheveled look told me that the night hadn't been what she made it seem. "I came to see the kids," I said calmly. "Since I was here, I sent the niece home. If I'd known you'd be this late, I wouldn't have stuck around." Sophia seemed to evaluate my mood, but I didn't care. I was beyond the point of caring. "I didn't know you were here," she said, avoiding my gaze.
I'm sorry.
I shook my head and stood up.
No worries.
"Crap happens," I said flatly, grabbing my coat. As I left, I simply said, "Good night, Sophia," and walked out. Months later, I was at the gym, pushing myself through another grueling workout, but when I stepped on the scale, I saw that I'd only lost 10 pounds in 3 months. Frustrated, I stormed out of the gym, feeling like life wasn't playing fair. Outside, Chloe saw my mood and asked if everything was okay. Before I even knew what was happening, I found myself telling her everything. My struggles with weight, the mess with Sophia, the kids, even Ethan. She listened attentively, then asked, "What do you really want, Oliver?" "I just wanted to feel good about myself," I admitted, the words coming out almost reluctantly. Chloe nodded, her gaze serious. "Losing weight won't be the magic fix you think it will. Real self-esteem comes from within. It's about knowing your value beyond your appearance. You need to love who you are, not just what you look like." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She handed me a card for her brother-in-law, Tyler, a personal trainer and life coach. "If you decide to work with him," she said, "give it your all. He'll push you, but it'll be worth it." A week later, I met Tyler. He was fit and imposing, the kind of guy whose presence made you want to shrink back. He was all business, professional and distant. His first words to me were blunt. "This won't be easy. No excuses, no exceptions." He wasn't here to coddle me. He was here to make a change. He even inspected my kitchen, asking personal questions about my habits, as if the state of my cupboards could reveal the state of my mind. It was tough, but despite his cold approach, I agreed to follow his program. Tyler's routine was grueling. On the first day, I met with a nutritionist who made me realize just how much my diet needed to change. I began cooking all my meals, and the workouts felt like torture. I was constantly hungry and physically drained, my body aching in places I didn't know existed. Everyday tasks became monumental. I wanted nothing more than to collapse into bed. But the kids needed me, and I couldn't ignore them. Despite my exhaustion, I made time for them. Sophia, surprisingly, was accommodating. She didn't mind me stopping by the house, even without notice. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was something else, but I believed she genuinely wanted to do what was best for the kids. She even insisted I keep the house key. There was an unspoken understanding. I was to respect her space, and she'd do the same. But I didn't respect the boundaries I'd promised to uphold. Jealousy started eating at me like a slow burn. At first, it was just curiosity, innocent, almost subconscious. I wasn't looking for anything specific, but I wanted to know how she was living without me. The first sign something was off came when I noticed a new toothbrush in the bathroom. I tried to brush it off, but then I saw men's body wash in the shower. I felt a pang of worry. There were no men's clothes in the closet, but I found a pair of boxers in her laundry basket. Seeing another man's underwear mixed with my wife's things was like a violation. A feeling of invasion, like he was taking over my space. My heart pounded, but I swallowed my anger and acted normal. I didn't want her to know I was snooping. I wanted to appear unaffected, as if none of this was bothering me. I asked the kids if they'd noticed anything strange or if anyone new had been around, but they seemed oblivious. It looked like Sophia was keeping her end of the deal, keeping the new man out of their sight. Her dates were happening when the kids were at school or on nights when they weren't home. But despite how hard I tried to keep my emotions in check, I knew Sophia could sense my pain. It was impossible to hide. Sometimes, when I caught her looking at me, there was a flicker of guilt in her eyes. She knew. She knew I was still stuck in the past, while she was moving on, and it cut deeper than I could express. Tyler's workouts helped, though. His gruff voice barking orders during bench presses or his sarcastic comments while I struggled through sit-ups gave me something to focus on. It distracted me from the constant weight of my emotions. His relentless training, pushing me past my limits, gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. Even the jabs about my nickname stung, but they redirected my anger in a healthier way. Work became another refuge. Like many men going through a tough time, I found comfort in focusing on the numbers. At work, I was valued for results, for getting things done. If something didn't work, you fixed it. If only relationships were that straightforward. Time passed, each day dragging on but somehow slipping away all the same. The pain was constant, but there were moments of progress. My body began to change slowly but surely. I started to see some of the results I'd been working for. But the emotional toll was harder to measure. By the time the anniversary of our separation came around, I realized that Sophia and I had subtly drifted apart. I didn't notice the shift at first, but it became glaringly obvious a couple of weeks before the date. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I was waiting for Sophia to come home. I spilled soda on my shirt and decided to throw it in the wash. I didn't think she'd be back for a while, but she walked in unexpectedly while I was in the kitchen, fumbling with the wet shirt. I didn't want her to see me shirtless, especially after everything she'd said about my body in the past. I was still haunted by those judgments. As I struggled to untangle the shirt, I didn't notice her standing in the doorway until I heard her footsteps stop behind me. I turned and saw her staring at me, wide-eyed, like she'd seen something she didn't expect. Her gaze made me feel exposed, and I instinctively tried to cover myself with the twisted shirt. Hey, Sophia," I stammered, trying to sound casual but feeling the tension in the air. "How was your night?" "It was fine," she said slowly, her eyes not leaving mine. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken things. Her eyes were comparing me to someone else, and it hit me harder than I expected. I felt a rush of emotion but managed to hold my ground. "The kids are in bed, dinner's done, and homework's finished. I'm heading out now. If you don't mind, I'll just use your bathroom before I leave." I hurried out of the kitchen, not wanting to stay in the room for another second. When I got to the bathroom, I finally managed to pull the shirt on. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I was taken aback. I hadn't really been paying attention to my body lately, avoiding mirrors after that disappointing weigh-in. But the mirror in the bathroom was bigger than the tiny one in my apartment. When I saw my reflection, I was shocked. My chest had definition, and my midsection was noticeably slimmer. The excess fat I used to carry was gone, replaced by lean muscle. My shoulders had broadened, and for the first time, I didn't just see a guy who had let himself go. I saw a man who was getting back on track. And maybe, just maybe, that was why Sophia had been staring at me earlier. Was it possible she wasn't disgusted? Could she actually find me attractive again? That moment in Sophia's bathroom was a turning point for me. For the first time in a long time, I actually felt like I was worth something. I stood up straighter, and when I left the bathroom, I walked past her with a newfound sense of pride. "All right, Sophia, I'm heading out. Have a good night," I said, keeping my tone casual. She watched me leave, her eyes lingering a little longer than usual. This time, I didn't shy away from her gaze. I let it be, pretending not to notice, but inwardly, I embraced it. Good night, Oliver," she said, her voice softer than I expected. With that, I walked out the door with a slight swagger in my step. Something had shifted in me. Since that moment in the bathroom, I couldn't help but notice how much I had changed. I wasn't just getting fitter. I was becoming someone I could respect again. Without realizing it, I found myself constantly comparing who I was now to who I had been when I first started. Some changes were glaringly obvious. My clothes fit differently, the collar of my dress shirts no longer strained against my neck, and my waist had shrunk from a 44 to a 36. Other changes were more subtle, but they felt just as rewarding. I could bend down without grunting, tie my shoes without awkwardly spreading my legs, and get in and out of the car without feeling like I had to brace myself. The next time Tyler saw me, he couldn't help but notice the shift in my attitude. The exhaustion had disappeared, the weight seemed lighter, and I no longer dreaded the treadmill. My energy had skyrocketed. I even found myself checking my reflection more often during workouts. Looks like someone's starting to notice the results of all that hard work, Tyler teased. I laughed. Yeah, I guess you caught me. Oh, go ahead and admire yourself, he said, stepping aside theatrically. I'm not standing in your way, am I? Handsome, I asked, half smiling. No, you're not, he said, rolling his eyes. Thanks for asking. I shot back, laughing so hard I had to stop lifting for a moment. Anytime, Your Highness. I wouldn't want to block true love at first sight. Tyler's tone was lighter than usual, and for the first time, it wasn't filled with sarcasm. Felt good to joke around with him. He usually acted like a strict drill sergeant, so this playful side was a welcome change. Another noticeable change was how people began to interact with me. They seemed friendlier, a little more engaging. They lingered longer when they spoke to me and smiled a bit more. I hate to admit it, but it was hard to ignore. It's a sad truth that attractive people are treated better. And I couldn't deny it. Suddenly, I was receiving the kind of attention I hadn't had in years. Sophia, too, had started acting differently. Ever since that night at her house, she'd been more attentive, her smiles more genuine. She'd even started brushing her hair out of her face in a way that felt almost flirtatious. The pity she had once shown me had disappeared, replaced by something like respect. Everything came to a head on the anniversary of our separation. I'd spoken to my lawyer and given the go-ahead for the divorce papers. I wanted them ready so we could move forward without the cold formality of being served. I decided to give them to Sophia myself. I thought the end of our marriage deserved the same respect as its beginning. That night, I found her upstairs, getting ready, probably for another date. She was in front of the mirror, putting on earrings. I knocked lightly on the doorframe to get her attention. "Oh, hey, Oliver," she said, turning to face me. She spread her arms wide and asked, "How do I look?" I smiled. "You look beautiful, Sophia, but I'm sure you already knew that." Her eyes roamed over me, her gaze lingering, taking me in. "No," she replied, "just trying on clothes to see how they fit. You remember this dress?" She gestured to the outfit she had on. I stepped closer, then burst out laughing. "Wait, is that the dress I bought you for your birthday? What was it? 8 years ago." She grinned and laughed. 9 years ago, actually. Remember, I saw it in the window and mentioned I liked it. You said we couldn't afford it, but then you got that promotion. You surprised me by coming home with the dress and the good news. "I remember," I said, a nostalgic smile creeping onto my face. "We went to that new Italian restaurant to celebrate." Her expression softened, and she said quietly, "That was also the night we conceived the twins." A wave of pleasant memories flooded me, remembering how close we had felt back then. But just as quickly, those memories soured. I remembered how, in the years that followed, I had struggled to please her, while she seemed to slip further away. I couldn't stop imagining her with someone else. Another man in my place. Though I didn't remember Sebastian's face clearly, the thought of him was enough to fill me with rage. I shook off the dark thoughts and said coolly, "I have something for you." I placed a manila envelope on the bed, and her expression immediately changed, darkening as she looked at it. "Wow, you didn't waste any time getting that ready, huh?" she said, bitterness creeping into her voice. "Well, it did take me a year," I said, trying to make light of the situation, but she didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. She simply turned back to the mirror, as if the envelope didn't matter at all. "I'll look at it when I get a chance," she said flatly, dismissing me. I left the room, puzzled by her reaction. I hadn't expected a celebration, but I thought she'd at least be relieved to begin the process. I found Lucas first, playing video games in his room. "Is your homework done?" I asked sternly. He turned around quickly, guilt written all over his face. "Almost," he muttered, looking away. When he saw my expression, he added, "I'll finish it now." Good choice, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, before turning off the game. I chose not to respond, figuring it was better to let it go. Sometimes it's better to walk away than to get tangled up in minor things. Next, I found Maya in the living room, flipping through a photo album. The cover caught my eye. It was our wedding album. No need to ask about homework, I said, sitting next to her and wrapping my arm around her. Hey, pumpkin, what are you looking at? I asked, my voice softening. You're in Mommy's wedding pictures, Maya said, pausing on a photo of me and Ethan in our tuxedos. You look just the same, especially now that you've lost all that weight. You look really handsome. So, I wasn't handsome before? I teased, a grin spreading across my face as I watched her try to backpedal. She stammered, her face turning red. I let her squirm for a moment before I relented. Just kidding. Thanks for the compliment, I said, giving her a reassuring smile. She smiled back, leaning into me, but then her expression shifted. Are you and Mommy ever going to get back together? She asked, her voice suddenly serious. I sighed, wishing I didn't have to have this conversation. No, sweetie, I don't think so, I answered honestly, my mind drifting to the divorce papers I had left on Sophia's bed. Why not? She asked, her brow furrowing. Sometimes, adults realize they can't stay married, but that doesn't mean we stop loving you. You and Mommy don't love each other anymore? She asked, her voice growing more insistent as she saw through my attempt to soften the truth. We care about each other, but not the way a husband and wife do, I said gently. That's why we have to split up, but we'll always be friends. Nothing changes how much we love you. Maya looked sad, her eyes downcast, and she turned away. I kissed her forehead softly, but it felt like a small gesture in the face of her big questions. Explaining divorce to a 9-year-old is never easy. To them, it's simple. If you love each other, you stay together. Why can't life just be that straightforward? I used to think it was, too, before everything changed when Sebastian came into the picture. I sensed someone behind me and turned to see Sophia walking away. As Maya and I continued to look through the album, I couldn't help but wonder how much of our conversation she had overheard. A few nights later, I decided to attend my weekly biking class. I hadn't been in a while, what with all the changes Tyler had set in motion, so I was greeted by some unfamiliar faces. But one familiar face stood out, and I made my way to the bike next to hers. Hey Isla, I said cheerfully. She turned and smiled. Oliver, long time no see. I almost didn't recognize you. You've slimmed down so much, you're too good for us now. Where have you been? She teased, her eyes scanning me appreciatively. I felt a blush creep up my neck. I've been around, just working out at different times, I replied, trying to hide my nerves. How have we not bumped into each other? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Like I said, you're too good for us now, I joked, nudging her playfully. Trust me, you're definitely not fat, I said, glancing at her and realizing I was checking her out. I froze, unsure whether to apologize or pretend I hadn't just stared. Luckily, the trainer started class, saving me from further embarrassment. After the class, as Isla walked past me, she brushed her shoulder against mine. Don't be a stranger, she said with a playful smile, her hips swaying as she headed for the door. I couldn't help but wonder if she was flirting with me. After being married for so long, I wasn't sure how to read the signs anymore. Over the next few weeks, I continued attending the class, mostly to interact with Isla. Every time, the interaction played out the same way, and I began to feel more and more convinced that she might be interested in me. I wanted to ask her out, but I kept hesitating. Every time I saw her, I'd think, this is the moment. But I always chickened out at the last second. Tyler noticed me checking her out a few times, but he didn't say anything. I could tell, though, that he knew exactly what was going on. One day, Isla approached me, a puzzled expression on her face. Your friend over there told me you had something to ask me, she said, pointing behind her. I turned to see Tyler in the distance, grinning and winking at me. I mentally cursed him. Yeah, I stammered. She waited, and after a few seconds, I found the courage to speak. I was wondering if you'd like to do something together sometime. She seemed thoughtful for a moment, and I braced myself for rejection, but then she smiled brightly. Are you asking me out? She asked, her voice full of excitement. Her enthusiasm gave me the confidence I needed. Yes, I am. Would you like to go out with me? I asked, feeling like I had just taken a huge leap. She handed me a piece of paper with her number. Call me tonight, she said. Seeing the confusion on my face, she laughed. Your friend bet me you wouldn't ask me out because you were too chicken. Really? I glared over at Tyler, who was now laughing too. Yep, he said, grinning. But I had faith in you. I'm $10 richer thanks to you. Happy to help. Let me know whenever I can make him lose a bet, I said, tossing a towel at him. Isla smiled and reminded me to call her after 8 as she walked out. Tyler walked over with a smug look on his face. So, what does she want? He asked, pretending to be clueless. She came over to tell me what an intrusive a hole you are, I replied, throwing the towel at him. He laughed it off. You're welcome. That night, I found myself facing a dilemma. I hadn't been on a first date in over a decade. I had no idea where to take Isla or what to expect. Were the rules still the same? Dinner and a movie, or something more adventurous? My mind raced with questions. Surprisingly, Ethan gave the best advice. I always take a girl somewhere unexpected. Dinner and a movie? Boring. That just gets you friend-zoned. You need to do something fun like a shooting range or a batting cage. That excitement works every time. I couldn't think of anything exciting like that. But then Ethan suggested, why not take her on a bike ride? Didn't you meet her in a biking class? I asked. Exactly, he said. And she was pretty excited about the idea. So that Saturday, I packed up the bikes and we headed to the trail. But what seemed like a good idea quickly turned awkward. Biking on a first date turned out to be sweaty and uncomfortable, leaving little space for conversation. We took a few breaks, but we were too busy catching our breath to talk much. I started to worry that the date was a bust, and Sophia's taunt about me being boring echoed in my mind. Then something unexpected happened. A panicked kid ran up to us, yelling incoherently. We tried to calm him down, but he was too frantic. He gestured for us to follow him, and when we arrived, we saw a man lying on the ground, desperately holding on to someone dangling over a cliff. They're over there. Please help them, the boy cried. I acted on instinct. I'll grab him. You two help the kid, I told Isla and the other person nearby. We quickly pulled the man and his child to safety. Watching the father embrace his son was one of the most emotional moments of my life. The father whispered something to his son before passing out. Isla had already called emergency services, and we tried to revive the man, but it was too late. The paramedics arrived, and we were interviewed by the police. Before we left, I found a phone on the ground, probably the father's. I called a contact labeled Kara, wife, to inform her of what happened, then handed the phone to the police before they left. I thought the date was ruined, but Isla was thrilled. Oh my God! You saved that guy and his kid. You're a hero, she exclaimed. I tried to downplay the whole situation. It was a team effort, I said. But Isla shook her head, her eyes serious. You acted without hesitation, she insisted. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. The night ended with a passionate kiss and the promise of a second date. For our second date, we kept things more traditional. We talked about our lives, our pasts, and our kids. She had 2 children, one in high school, and we spent hours just getting to know each other better. The night ended with us making out on her porch, but things were easy, light. That was until the third date. On Valentine's Day, we went to see 50 Shades of Grey, and I could tell it stirred something in her. When we got back to her place, she hinted that her kids were away and invited me in. Her intentions were clear, and as things began to heat up, all I could hear were the hurtful words Sophia had said about my inadequacy. The pressure weighed down on me, and I couldn't escape it.
Sorry, Isla.
I'm not ready, I said, holding back tears, rushing out of her apartment and leaving her confused. After that, I tried to avoid the gym, at least I tried to avoid her. I couldn't face Isla after what happened. So, I stayed close to Tyler during workouts, avoiding eye contact and pretending not to see her. It felt childish, but it was all I could do to protect myself from the humiliation the situation had dredged up. Deep-seated insecurities that Sophia had planted resurfaced. I started imagining that every time I saw Isla talking or laughing with someone, they were mocking me. Those thoughts kept me isolated, and soon, my workouts began to suffer. Tyler noticed my behavior and wasn't happy about it. "Come on, King Oliver, what's going on with you?" he snapped one day after I quit early on the treadmill. "I'm just not feeling it today," I muttered, trying to avoid his gaze. He mocked me. "Not feeling it? What, want to retire to your chambers?" That was it. I'd had enough. "Back off, Tyler. I'm not in the mood for your crap," I shot back. As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Trying to ease the tension, I added, "I'm just going through a lot. I need a break." He gave me a cold look and sneered. "So you want a break and call me when you feel better?" Even though I knew he was mocking me, I considered it a break. "Sounds good. I just need you to ease up a bit," I said, hoping for some understanding. To my surprise, he shrugged. "Sure, why not? Really, though, I don't want to waste time on someone who can't get his act together. Let's call it a day so I can focus on clients who actually care." "Are you serious, Tyler?" I asked, stunned. I chased after him, desperate for an explanation. "So, I need just one day, and you drop me after everything I've done? I'm not worth a second chance." He ignored me, but I kept pressing until he turned around and shoved me, pinning me against him. His voice was full of anger. "You know what you are, Oliver? A winner. You want sympathy because your wife didn't appreciate you, but life doesn't work that way. Winners get back up and prove people wrong. Losers whine." Tyler's words cut deep, and I barely kept my anger in check. He smirked and asked, "So what are you, King Oliver? A winner or a winner?" His challenge sparked something in me, but I didn't back down. He pointed to the treadmill and ordered, "Get back on and give me 20 more minutes." Fueled by rage, I ran faster than I ever had before. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but I pushed myself. When the treadmill finally stopped, I stormed off to the locker room, still fuming. Tyler followed me and quietly sat next to me as I caught my breath. After a long silence, he finally spoke up. "I proposed to my wife 3 times before she said yes," he said, his voice vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard before. "She kept turning me down because she was in love with another man." I looked at him, taken aback. "Who was the other man?" He hesitated before replying, "Her husband." I was shocked. It turned out she was a widow, and Tyler had spent years feeling like he couldn't live up to her late husband. It was a rare moment of honesty from him, and it caught me off guard. "How did you handle that?" I asked. He sighed. "I tried everything to prove I was good enough, but in the end, she only saw me as a friend." He paused, his frustration palpable. "It's not about how you look. Confidence based on others' approval is shallow. Real worth comes from within." Then he shared a lesson that hit me hard. "If you've done everything you can and it's still not enough, it's not you. It's them." Her rejection didn't make me less worthy. It just meant she couldn't appreciate what I brought to the table. His words made me see him in a different light. Tyler wasn't just a tough coach. He was human, struggling with his own battles. He continued, "After breaking things off, she eventually realized what she had lost and fought to be with me. We've been happily married for 5 years now. But here's the thing. People always chase after the 20% they're missing, not realizing they have the 80% already. You were Sophia's 80%, Oliver. Don't take that for granted. I push you because I don't want you to feel entitled," Tyler said, his voice firm. "You're not some pathetic guy who needs pity. You've got strength, determination, and honor. Once you stop seeing yourself through your wife's eyes, you'll realize you're King Oliver. Start acting like it." I hit the showers afterward, the warm water soothing my aching muscles. Tyler's words replayed in my head, and for the first time in a long while, I believed them. I'd spent too much time judging myself through other people's standards. I'd compared myself to Ethan because everyone else did. I believed Sophia's view of me, that I wasn't worth fighting for. But Tyler was right. My worth didn't depend on anyone else's opinion, and it wasn't defined by Sophia's rejection. I needed to believe in myself no matter what. Later that night, I was jolted out of a deep sleep by my phone ringing. Groggy, I checked the time. It was 4 a.m., and the caller was Ethan. Annoyed, I answered. "What, Ethan? Did I wake you?" His voice was unusually nervous. "You think I sat up, now wide awake, sensing something was wrong. What's going on?" He hesitated before blurting out, "Natalie's pregnant." I frowned, confused. "Who the hell is Natalie?" "The girl you met on our birthday," Ethan reminded me. I paused, recalling the young blonde cheerleader. I raised an eyebrow. "Is she even legal?" Ethan got defensive. "She's 20 and has her own apartment." "Did you check her ID?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood, but Ethan wasn't having it. "Do you always have to be such a smug prick?" he snapped. I shot back. "Do you always have to act like an irresponsible teenager? You're 35 and you got a 20-year-old pregnant. Ever heard of protection?" His voice turned icy. "You know what, Art? Enough. You've always thought you were better than me, looking down on everything I did. You were always Mom and Dad's favorite, the golden boy. And me? I'm the screw-up. I should feel sorry for you, but all I feel is frustration. Everyone worships you, the perfect son. Mom and Dad always bail you out, but when my life falls apart, I'm left alone. I was always the one who had to measure up to you," he snapped. "And don't even start with your pity P. Oliver. Every time they help me, they just lecture me about how I should be more like you. But you act like you've never needed anyone. When your wife cheated, who was there for you? Who let you crash on his couch? I've always had your back. Even in high school, when I stepped in to protect you from those damn bullies. So cut the crap about being alone." I opened my mouth to fire back, but something stopped me. I paused, actually taking in what he said. And for the first time, I realized he was right. Despite all our differences, Ethan had always been there for me. I'd spent so many years resenting him for things I thought were easy for him, but I never saw the full picture. While I was consumed with how much Mom and Dad bragged about me, I never realized how much they'd stepped in to prop him up because they didn't believe he could do it on his own. I had always seen him as the lucky, good-looking guy who had it easy, but from his perspective, he'd felt like a failure, especially after dropping out of college. And now, with a baby on the way, he was scared and unsure of how to handle it. He reached out to me for support, and instead of being there, I treated him like crap. That realization hit me hard. "You're right, Ethan," I said, the words surprisingly calm, without any hint of sarcasm. Ethan was caught off guard, and he didn't respond immediately. I took the opportunity to add, "You've always been there for me. Always. Even when I didn't realize it." Thanks," he mumbled, still processing it. Then, trying to shift the topic, I asked, "So, how far along is she?" He dropped his voice, suddenly more serious. "A couple of months. She just told me today." "Damn. Are you two keeping it?" I asked, trying to hide the concern I felt. "Yeah," he replied, his voice heavy. "How do you feel about that?" He was quiet for a moment, then confessed, "I'm scared, Art. How do I even raise a kid? I'm still acting like a kid myself. I'm not like you. Lucas and Maya have it lucky. They have you as a dad. What's my kid going to think of me?" I could almost feel the fear radiating from him, and I remembered the same thoughts I'd had when Sophia was pregnant. "Ethan, stop comparing yourself to me. That's the mistake I've always made with you. Believe it or not, I've always been jealous of you," I admitted. He stopped, stunned by the words. "Stop messing with me, Art. What could you possibly be jealous of? You've got everything together, especially now with all the weight you've lost." I chuckled, half at the irony of it all. "That's just it, Ethan. Neither of us should be jealous of the other. I've spent way too much time dealing with my own insecurities, and you've got your own stuff to figure out." "Why can't you?" he asked, a hint of frustration in his voice. "If you want to be responsible, then just be responsible. Want to be a good dad? Learn how to be one. It's that simple, I said, a little more sternly than I intended. Ethan muttered, "It's easy for you to say." "Yeah, it is easy to say," I admitted. "But it takes work and you can do it. You're one of the strongest people I know. I'd bet on you any day." I said it without hesitation, and it felt like something real. He took a deep breath. "Yeah. Okay, maybe." We talked for another couple of hours, and the more we spoke, the more I saw how seriously he was taking this. He wasn't trying to handle the situation like all the others. He was thinking about how his actions would affect his child. I realized that was what good fathers do. I shared some of my own parenting struggles with him, hoping to make him feel less alone. We laughed at some stories and shared some cautionary tales. I joked that fate would probably give him a girl, as a form of karmic payback, and we both laughed at that. Before we ended the call, I promised him that I'd always be there for him, no matter what. And for the first time, I meant it. As the sun started to rise, something had shifted in me during that conversation. I wasn't jealous of Ethan anymore. Not because I realized he was as jealous of me as I had been of him, but because I started to see myself differently. I was the one who had my life together. I was responsible, and those were things I should be proud of. They were my 80%, and I didn't need the other 20%. I was fine just the way I was. I got up and prepared for work, feeling more at peace than I had in a long time. Life moved at its steady pace after that. Weeks turned into months, and I noticed my outlook on everything slowly began to improve. The one downside, though, was Tyler. He seemed to feel like I didn't need him anymore. My transformation was complete. My weight loss had been so successful that there was no trace of my old self. But the real reason Tyler moved on was that I finally saw myself differently. My confidence had soared, and that had been his goal all along. Looking back, I saw how calculated his approach was, the sarcastic remarks, the relentless workouts, the tough love. It was all designed to help me stop seeing myself as some kind of victim of fate. Honestly, he was worth every penny I should have paid him. During our final workout, things with Isla came to a head. I got distracted when she walked by, and Tyler noticed. "You gonna just keep staring at her or actually talk to her?" he asked, giving me a knowing look. I hadn't even realized I was staring until he pointed it out. "Sorry, Tyler." "Getting back to it," I mumbled, grabbing a dumbbell and focusing on my reps. "Look, Art," Tyler said cautiously. "I'm not trying to push you, but it's obvious you want to talk to her. Whatever happened between you two, it can't be worth all this effort to pretend she doesn't exist." I looked around, embarrassed. "Am I that obvious?" Tyler snickered. "Just go talk to her." "I can't. After everything that happened, she'll probably laugh and walk away." He stopped staring at her and shrugged. "That's more effective." His smugness irked me, but I knew he was right. I saw Isla heading to the locker room and, swallowing my nervousness, I hurried to catch up with her. "Hey, Isla," I called out. She turned, her eyes immediately going to the floor. "Hey, Oliver," she said, her voice curt and uncomfortable. I felt the awkwardness between us but pushed through it. "How've you been?" I asked, my voice betraying my anxiety. "Pretty good," she said, still not meeting my gaze. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "Listen, I was hoping we could talk. Clear the air," I said. She nodded quickly. "When do you want to talk?" I took a chance. "Are you free now?" She hesitated, then said, "I need to shower first, but we can talk after that." "Okay, yeah, sure," I said, relieved as Isla disappeared into the locker room. I exhaled, glad I'd managed to get through the awkward moment. Tyler, talking to Chloe nearby, gave me a thumbs up, signaling his approval. After we both showered, we met up at a nearby Golden Corral. As we sat down to eat, I found myself struggling to find the right words. Small talk filled the silence, but I could tell Isla was getting impatient. Finally, I took a deep breath. I knew I had to address that night, the night when things almost happened. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, shaking her head. "You don't have to explain. It's fine. It's not the first time a man hasn't been attracted to me. I'm used to it. My ex-husband wasn't either. I'll get over it." I was stunned. What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yeah, she sighed, offering a sad smile. He used to call me Piggy and poke my stomach, even in front of his friends. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she quickly stood up to leave for the bathroom, but I gently reached for her hands. Isla, you've got it all wrong, I said, my voice soft. She looked up at me, and my heart broke seeing the pain in her eyes. Your ex was an idiot. I don't know what his problem was, but that's not how I feel. I'm attracted to you. You're sexy, fun, and beautiful. She blinked, clearly taken aback, then asked, Then why? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything I needed to share. I opened up about my story, my fears, my past, and all the insecurities that had held me back. She listened without interrupting, her eyes focused on me. When I finished, her reaction shocked me. She burst into uncontrollable laughter. What are you laughing at? I asked, horrified. This was exactly what I feared. She quickly calmed herself, still chuckling under her breath. I'm not laughing at you, she said, catching her breath. I'm laughing at us. This whole situation. Both of our spouses told us we were fat, ugly, and bad in bed. Your ex called you boring too? I asked, smiling despite the awkwardness. She nodded, trying to suppress another laugh. Yeah, but he was much better at it. He had years of practice. We both laughed, the tension finally lifting. The laughter continued, and we ignored the curious stares from the people around us. Eventually, the conversation turned into a sort of competition who had received the worst insults from their exes. Isla won, but only because her ex had been at it longer. At least Sophia had kept her disdain hidden until the very end. Well, she said, still smiling, today turned out way different than I expected. I thought I came on too strong and scared you off. I really liked you and didn't want you to see me the way he did. For once, I wanted to feel sexy, even if just for one night, so I went all in. But when nothing happened, I felt like a failure. I smiled back, understanding more than I could say. I get it. I was so focused on not being what Sophia said I was that I ended up proving her right. But talking to you, Isla, it felt different. It was comforting, sharing with someone who'd been through the same kind of rejection. I didn't feel so alone. So, what do two so-called losers who are bad in bed do together? I joked. Own it? She replied with a grin, and then, with mock seriousness, added, Hi, my name is Isla and I'm bad in bed. I chuckled and responded, Hi, Isla. We sat together, and for the first time in a long while, I realized how much we had in common, how much we both had suffered, yet how much we were learning to own it. Life might throw us curveballs, but sometimes it surprises you with something good. You just have to be open to it. How about this? I suggested, feeling more at ease. Let's forget proving our exes wrong. Let's just go out again, no pressure, no expectations. Let's just have fun and get to know each other. She smiled brightly. I like that. No pressure, just fun. Then, with a playful smirk, she added, And if we happen to sleep together, so be it. I nearly fell out of my chair laughing. Her words sparked something inside me. A sense of relaxation. A connection. Yeah, if it happens, it happens, I joked, crossing my fingers. We clinked our cups in a toast, unaware that someone familiar was watching us. By the time I noticed, she had already left. I wouldn't learn about this until weeks later. I stood in Sophia's bedroom doorway trying to stay calm. Why does she make everything so difficult? I thought to myself. Every time I tried to move forward, it felt like another obstacle appeared. She was dragging her feet on signing the divorce papers, and it was infuriating. We talked about it so many times, but every time, she brushed it off like it didn't matter. Her indifferent attitude was like a slap in the face. I was tired of being tied to her, of her not letting me move on. Even when I tried, her words haunted me. I finally snapped. Sophia, what's the problem? I asked, impatience creeping into my voice. She was sitting on the bed, casually applying lotion, acting like I wasn't even there. To make it worse, she wore new lingerie that I assumed her boyfriend probably bought for her. You can't expect me to sign the papers without a lawyer looking them over, she said, condescendingly. They've been on your dresser for a month. How am I supposed to get my lawyer to review them if I don't have them? She sighed, looking exasperated. I haven't found a lawyer yet, Oliver. I clenched my fists, trying to stay composed. When I do, I'll give them to him. Calm down. You're going to wake the kids, she said, patting the bed, as if I were the one overreacting. I counted to 5, trying not to explode. What do you mean you haven't found a lawyer yet? She looked surprised by my tone. I wasn't expecting you to just drop the papers on me. I thought we'd talk about it first. I'm pretty sure we covered everything when you called me a fat, boring loser who's bad in bed. I shot back, irritated. Her voice whined as she prepared for another round of the same argument. I was tired of it, so I steered the conversation back on track. When do you plan on getting a lawyer? Have you even started looking? I pressed. Instead of answering, she deflected. Why the sudden rush? You didn't seem to care before. Are you kidding me? You're the one who wanted this divorce. You found me so repulsive that you went after other men. Now, I'm giving you what you want, and you're making it harder for me. Why? Her hot-headed attitude softened slightly. I'm not trying to make this difficult for you, she said, her tone genuine but still guarded. And maybe I did say things I didn't mean. I never meant to make things harder during our separation. But trust was in short supply. Then sign the papers, I said firmly. They're as fair as I could make them. She hesitated. I just think we should talk first. No, Sophia, there's nothing left to discuss. I snapped, my patience completely drained. She went silent, realizing that raising her voice would only make things worse. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. Look, I'm not trying to screw you over. I just need to move on. But I can't do that if I'm still carrying the weight of our marriage. It's too much. Her voice softened. I didn't mean to be so brutally honest. But the words just came out. I GF'd at her, and saw her eyes welling up. I'm sorry, Oliver, she whispered. I've been really terrible to you. I didn't respond at first, just listened. She seemed to be waiting for something. So after a long pause, she asked, Can you ever forgive me? Her question hung in the air, heavy and raw. Could I forgive her? Could I really move past the day that had changed everything? Over time, the sharp pain of that day faded, becoming just a few paragraphs in the story of my life. I took another deep breath and answered quietly, I do forgive you, Sophia. Her face softened, and she smiled, a look of relief flooding over her. Really? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. Yes, I said. Now I just want to move forward. Her smile grew, but I could see the disappointment start to creep in. That's all I needed to hear, she said, though the tension in her voice remained. You forgive me. Feeling somewhat hopeful about our conversation, I added, Great. Now you can sign the papers with a clear conscience. But her smile faltered, then shifted into something else. Disappointment, followed by anger. Wait, are you just saying what I want to hear to get me to sign? She demanded, eyes narrowing. I blinked, caught off guard. What? I asked, confused by the sudden shift. She stepped closer, the scent of eucalyptus lotion wafting in the air. Who is she? She asked, her tone now cold. Who? I replied, still lost. The woman you've been seeing.
Isla.
Who is she? She pressed, stepping back but closing the gap at the same time. My mind raced. How did she know about Isla? Then it hit me. She was jealous. The audacity of it made me laugh, which only seemed to make her angrier. Is this funny to you? She snapped. Yeah, it is, I said, trying to keep my composure. The hypocrisy is just hilarious. She ignored my remark, her face still set in anger. Who is she? She repeated. I didn't owe her an answer, but I gave her one anyway. Someone I met at the gym. Her response was dripping with irony. The gym, of course. She hesitated before continuing, her voice taking on a more accusing tone. How do you know about her? I paused for a second, and then I shifted the focus back. How do you know about her? I asked, watching her intently. She bit her lip before admitting, I saw you at Golden Corral a few weeks ago, laughing with her. I got curious, so I went through your phone. I froze, feeling the sting of violation. You went through my phone? I asked, disbelief in my voice. Yeah, she said, her tone flat. I saw texts from a woman named Isla and connected the dots. I almost retorted, but then I remembered my own behavior, snooping through her things. Instead, I shrugged. What does it matter? We're separated. You're with Sebastian. Did you expect me to stay celibate while you played the single life? Her anger flickered for a second, then faded, replaced by a softer look. I guess I didn't think about you being with someone else, she admitted quietly, her voice tinged with regret. Instead of feeling vindicated, I felt strangely offended. Oh, so because you didn't want me, you thought no one else would? I shot back, unable to hold it in. Her eyes narrowed and she said, Your actions speak for themselves. I shook my head. You're putting words in my mouth. Her tone softened. You're right, Oliver. I didn't think anyone else would be interested, but now that you've lost weight. She let the sentence hang there, unfinished. I understood the implication loud and clear. So, when I was overweight, you didn't worry about other women. Now that I'm fit, it's a problem. Her face darkened, and she swallowed. I guess, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, hardening my resolve. Too bad it doesn't matter, Sophia. You're with Sebastian. You don't get to be jealous. Her face twisted with conflicting emotions, and then she admitted quietly, Sebastian and I broke up a while ago. She tried to sound casual, but I could see the cracks in her mask. I didn't know how to respond, whether to gloat, offer sympathy, or just walk away. I stayed quiet for a long moment before asking, Why? She hesitated, almost as if she didn't want to say it. People meet, they have fun, and then it's over. Not everyone rides off into the sunset, she said, looking down. I sat next to her, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, almost to herself, she added, We were supposed to. Yeah, we were, I murmured, realizing too late that I had said it aloud. She looked up at me, eyes filled with sadness. But somewhere along the way, we lost the connection. It became all chores, bills, and work. A tear slid down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly. I messed up, and now everything's ruined. The twins are struggling, and I'm stuck looking at old photos, wishing I could go back. Sebastian wasn't our problem, He was just a symptom of the deeper issues in our marriage. I sat beside her, feeling a mixture of pity and relief. You can't change the past, I said quietly, knowing it was true, but neither of us had ever been able to move on from it. She turned to me, her eyes searching mine as though seeing me for the first time in a long while. She took a deep breath, grabbed my hand and said, I made a mistake giving up on us. On you. I pulled my hand away, but she held on tightly. Her gaze was intense, searching, like she was trying to make me feel what she did. And then, as though making a sudden decision, she leaned in, grabbing my face, and kissed me. Her hands, once so familiar, now felt foreign as they pushed me back onto the bed. Sophia, what are you doing? I asked, bewildered. She didn't answer right away. Oliver, don't talk. Just do this with me, she whispered, her lips brushing my neck. I almost gave in. But then, Sebastian's face flashed in my mind, the painful reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I couldn't go down this road again. No, I said firmly, gently pushing her away. She fell back on the bed, surprised. Oliver, no? She started. But I interrupted, standing up like the bed was on fire. You can't keep doing this to me, Sophia. I'm not your backup plan. You can't just come back when things don't work out with Sebastian. You threw me away, and now you don't get to change your mind. She sat in silence for a long while, her eyes downcast, thinking. Then, in a quiet voice, she asked, Do you still love me? The question caught me off guard. My response should have been easy after everything she put me through, but it wasn't. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. Her gaze softened, almost hopeful, as she came closer and took both of my hands. Be honest with yourself. Don't let pride answer for you. I thought about everything we'd been through, the dates, the wedding, the kids. I realized I did love that version of Sophia, the one I married, but this version of her, the one who had hurt me so deeply, was someone else. It was complicated, but I knew the truth. No, I said softly, my voice breaking with the weight of it. I don't, Sophia. Not that way. Not anymore. The words felt heavy, and the silence that followed was suffocating. She sat there, stunned, tears welling in her eyes as she backed away from me like I was a stranger. She wept quietly, and I didn't know what to do. I stood there, watching her, unsure whether to comfort her, walk away, or just let her process. Eventually, she wiped her tears and looked at me. Her face a mix of anger, confusion, and pain. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She asked, her voice thick with accusation. What? I replied, taken aback by her sudden tone. No, you're telling me you don't love me. You're putting me in my place after everything I did, she said bitterly. Her words stung, but I paused for a moment. While I didn't enjoy seeing her hurt, there was a strange sense of justice in the air, something that felt long overdue. After everything she'd put me through, it was almost as if the scales had finally been. Fine, I said, my voice calm, perhaps too calm. Let me say I did enjoy it. Can you really blame me? She looked like she was ready to argue, but I held up my hand to stop her. Just listen, I continued. You gave up on me, Sophia. You cheated, mocked me, and asked for a divorce. But even then, I still stood by you. I didn't expose you to the kids or make the divorce messy. I let you live your life with Sebastian without a complaint. Despite all of that, you never found anything worth fighting for in me. But now, after I lose a few pounds, suddenly you do? It's not just the weight. Before I could say anything else, she quickly cut in. Yes, I'm more attracted to you now, but it's more than just that. You're different now, more confident. You're out there doing things. This is the you I've always wanted. Her words hit hard. She wanted me to be someone else, someone I wasn't, because who I was just wasn't enough for her. She still didn't get it, and deep down I doubted she ever would. I could have argued with her, pointed out how selfish her logic was, how she'd expected me to change without ever giving us a real chance. But what was the point? I didn't need her to see things my way anymore. For the first time, I didn't care what she thought of me. I was finally free. Do us both a favor, Sophia, I said, my voice firm. Sign the papers. Dragging this out isn't helping either of us. Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked out of the room, hearing her crying as I left. 6 months later, it was finally official. The divorce papers were in my hand, the last remaining reminder of my life with Sophia, aside from the 2 kids now fighting over the remote in the living room. Lucas, Maya, don't make me come out there, I called from my bedroom, the noise of their argument turning into hushed bickering. I sighed, refolding the papers and slipping them back into their envelope. No matter how much I'd moved on, the finality of the divorce still stung. It was the closing of a chapter, painful yet offering the possibility of something new. My phone buzzed with a message from Isla. What are you up to, lover? I smiled and texted back, thinking of you. Can't wait to see you again. Last night had been our first time together, and the memories brought a grin to my face. We'd taken things slow, dating, spending time at each other's places, even introducing our kids to each other. Sophia had made a big deal out of it, citing our agreement to keep our relationship separate from the kids. Technically, she was right, but we both knew what really bothered her. I'd apologized, promising not to bring anyone around until the divorce was final. And today, that day had finally arrived. I can't wait to see you either, I replied, recalling the warmth of Isla's body against mine. Her ex-husband must have been crazy to call her boring. Later that afternoon, I dropped the kids off at Sophia's. Her puffy eyes told me she'd received the same divorce papers. We exchanged a brief look, but her attention was quickly pulled to the kids' chatter. She gave me a weak smile and closed the door behind her. I got into the car and drove to my brother's place, My thoughts focused on what had been happening in Ethan's life. Lately, I'd been spending more time with him, supporting him as he navigated a major change. Today was Natalie's baby shower, and though Ethan wanted to go, he didn't want to be the only guy there. So he'd asked me to join him. I rearranged my schedule to back him up. When I arrived, my mom greeted me with her usual warmth and a big hug. "Hey, Oliver. Ladies, it's my other son, the newly single one," she called out, and the room burst into laughter. I couldn't help but blush as everyone cheered. After I dropped off my gift, I found Natalie lounging on the couch. "Hey, Prar. How's my nephew?" I joked, grinning. She giggled. "We don't know yet. Could be your niece." Ethan, overhearing, chimed in, "It's a nephew." I laughed, teasing him about Karma possibly giving him a daughter as the shower wrapped up. I stayed to help clean up. Mom watched me curiously before speaking. "There's something different about you lately," she said, a warm smile on her face. "I can't explain it, but I like it." "Thanks, Mom," I replied, feeling a rush of gratitude. She continued, her voice filled with love. "When I heard Natalie was having Ethan's baby, I worried about him. He's not like you. We never had to worry about you. You always had it together, but Ethan, he's different. He'll be fine though, Oliver. He's stronger than you think." I smiled and reassured her. She wiped a tear from her eye. "I know. I'm proud of both of you," she said, hugging me tightly. When Ethan came back, the cleanup was nearly done, and I left, feeling good about the day. The thought of my date with Isla lifted my spirits. As I started my car, the setting sun's glare made me pull down the visor. I GF'd at my reflection in the mirror, the real me, not just the guy who had lost weight or improved his looks, but someone responsible, loving, smart, hardworking, and a good father. I saw a man who was genuinely trying to be better, working hard for it. That's the real man in the mirror, I thought, smiling to myself.